The early morning sun cast long shadows across Oak Grove Avenue as the moving truck pulled up to house number 4275. Marcus Martinez stood in the driveway of his new home, his dark brown eyes taking in every detail of the two-story colonial house with its fresh white paint and navy blue shutters. After 15 years on the police force and countless hours of dedication, his promotion to police captain had finally allowed him to move his family to this peaceful suburban neighborhood in Oakland. His wife Lisa emerged from their car, her curly hair tied back in a neat bun. She wrapped an arm around his waist and leaned her head against his shoulder. "What are you thinking about, honey?" "Just that all those night shifts and overtime finally paid off," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. "Our kids are going to have so much space to play here." As if on cue, their children tumbled out of the car. Marcus Jr., or MJ as everyone called him, immediately started exploring the front yard, while 8-year-old Sophia twirled around, her pink dress floating in the morning breeze. "Dad, can I have the bedroom with the bay window?" MJ called out, his sneakers already leaving tracks in the dewy grass. "We'll see, buddy. First, let's get everything inside," Marcus answered, chuckling at his son's enthusiasm. The moving crew began unloading boxes and furniture, creating a steady stream of activity. Lisa organized the movers with practiced efficiency, directing traffic and ensuring everything went to the right rooms. Her experience as a high school administrator showed in the way she handled the controlled chaos. From next door, Karen Whitmore watched through her living room window, her thin lips pressed into a tight line. She had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and prided herself on maintaining its character. The arrival of new neighbors always put her on edge, and these ones made her particularly uncomfortable, though she would never admit why out loud. As the morning progressed, the Martinez family settled into a rhythm. Marcus and MJ carried boxes to their designated rooms while Sophia helped Lisa unpack the kitchen items. The house slowly began to feel like home, with family photos finding their places on walls and familiar furniture filling empty spaces. Around noon, several police officers pulled up in their personal vehicles. Marcus had invited some of his closest colleagues to help with the moving process. Officer Sam Carter, a rookie Marcus had mentored, brought pizza for everyone. Officer Diane Miller, one of the department's most respected detectives, came with her famous homemade lemonade. Karen's frown deepened as she watched more cars arrive. She picked up her phone and called her friend Barbara from the neighborhood association. "You won't believe who moved in next door," she whispered into the phone. "There must be at least 10 people in there now. It's disrupting the whole neighborhood's peace and quiet." Meanwhile, inside the Martinez home, the atmosphere was warm and cheerful. The helpers switched between unpacking boxes and sharing funny stories about Marcus's journey from beat cop to captain. "Remember when the captain here chased down that purse snatcher in flip-flops?" Sam laughed, passing out paper plates. "He'd just come from his daughter's pool party." Lisa joined in the laughter. "Oh, I remember that day. He ruined his favorite pair of shorts sliding across that parking lot." Sophia looked up from her pizza with wide eyes. "Daddy, did you really catch a bad guy in flip-flops?" Marcus ruffled her hair. "Sure did, princess. But don't tell anyone at the station. I have to maintain my dignified captain image now." As the afternoon wore on, more boxes were emptied, and rooms began taking shape. MJ had indeed claimed the bedroom with the bay window, turning it into his personal domain with posters of his favorite basketball players. Sophia's room became a paradise of pink and purple, with her stuffed animals arranged carefully on her bed. In the kitchen, Lisa unpacked her prized collection of family recipes, many passed down from her grandmother. She pulled out a worn notebook and showed it to Diane. "Next weekend, we're having a proper BBQ to thank everyone. Marcus just got his dream grill as a promotion gift from his parents." The mention of the BBQ made Marcus's eyes light up. "That reminds me, we need to set it up in the backyard." He headed outside with Sam and Officer Joe Bennett to assemble the impressive stainless steel grill. Karen watched the activity in the backyard through her fence slats, her anxiety rising. A BBQ. In her quiet neighborhood? She began making more phone calls to other neighbors, expressing her concerns about property values and neighborhood character. As evening approached, the helpers began to leave, each receiving warm hugs and thanks from the Martinez family. The house was mostly in order, though some boxes remained in corners, waiting to be unpacked at a more leisurely pace. After everyone left, the family gathered in their new living room. The space felt both strange and right, with their familiar furniture arranged differently, but still distinctly theirs. Marcus Jr. sprawled on the couch, already comfortable in his new surroundings, while Sophia curled up in her favorite reading chair by the window. "What do you think, everyone?" Marcus asked, looking around at his family. "Was this the right move?" "I love it, Dad," MJ said without hesitation. "My new room is awesome, and did you see the basketball hoop in the driveway? Plus, we're closer to your work now." Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "My room is perfect, and the backyard has so much space for tea parties." Lisa squeezed her husband's hand. "It's perfect, honey. We earned this." She paused, then added with a slight frown, "Though I'm not sure about that neighbor next door. She's been watching us all day." Marcus shrugged. "Give it time. Once people get to know us, they'll see we're just like any other family trying to live our best life." Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Marcus and Lisa sat on their new back porch. The spring air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from somewhere nearby. They could hear crickets chirping and the distant sound of traffic from the main road. "I can't wait for next weekend's BBQ," Lisa said, leaning against her husband. "It'll be nice to properly celebrate your promotion and our new home." Marcus nodded, his arm around her shoulders. 15 years of hard work, baby. From walking a beat to captain. Who would have thought? "I did," Lisa said firmly. "I always knew you'd make it." Inside her house, Karen Whitmore sat at her computer, typing out an email to the neighborhood association about maintaining community standards. She'd already decided she would be watching the Martinez family closely, especially after overhearing their BBQ plans. But for now, in their new home, the Martinez family was at peace. They had no idea that their upcoming celebration would become the talk of the neighborhood, or that their new neighbor's prejudices would lead to an incident that would change their community forever. As Marcus and Lisa headed to bed that first night in their new home, they were simply happy, grateful, and looking forward to all the memories they would make in this house. The future held both challenges and triumphs, but the Martinez family was ready for whatever came their way. They had each other, and in the end, that was all that really mattered. Sunday morning arrived with perfect weather for a BBQ. The sky was a brilliant blue, and a gentle breeze carried the promise of a beautiful spring day. Marcus Martinez woke up early, excited about hosting their first gathering in their new home. He stood in the backyard, admiring how Lisa had transformed the space in just a week. Colorful streamers hung between trees, and tables covered in bright tablecloths dotted the lawn. Their new grill stood proudly on the patio, already cleaned and ready for its first use. Lisa had insisted on setting everything up the night before, leaving nothing to chance. "Morning, honey," Lisa called from the back door, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. She joined him on the patio, handing him one. "Ready for the big day?" "More than ready," Marcus replied, taking a sip. "I've been marinating the meat since yesterday. Sam's bringing his famous corn on the cob, and Diane promised her potato salad." Inside, the kids were already awake and buzzing with excitement. MG helped his sister hang the last of the balloons while munching on toast. The kitchen counter was covered with food preparations, bowls of chopped vegetables, plates of seasoned meat ready for grilling, and Lisa's homemade desserts cooling on racks. Next door, Karen Whitmore's morning routine was interrupted by the sight of the Martinez family's preparations. She watched through her window as they set up speakers and arranged chairs. Her fingers itched to reach for her phone, but she held back, deciding to wait and see how disruptive this gathering would become. By noon, the first guests began arriving. Officer Sam Carter showed up with his wife Amy and their twins, carrying huge trays of corn. Detective Diane Miller brought not only her famous potato salad, but also her husband Pete and their teenage son. More police officers and their families followed, each bringing food and drinks to share. The backyard soon filled with laughter and conversation. Children chased each other across the lawn while adults gathered in small groups, sharing stories and jokes. The aroma of grilling meat and vegetables filled the air as Marcus worked his magic at the grill, wearing a novelty apron that read "Captain of the Kitchen." Lisa moved among the guests, making sure everyone had drinks and felt welcome. She had prepared a mix of traditional American BBQ dishes and some family recipes passed down from her Puerto Rican grandmother. The food table groaned under the weight of ribs, burgers, grilled chicken, rice and beans, various salads, and endless side dishes. "This marinade is incredible," Sam commented, taking another bite of chicken. "You got to share the recipe, Captain." Marcus grinned, flipping a burger. "Family secret, Carter. Been in Lisa's family for generations." Karen's surveillance continued throughout the afternoon. The sound of music and laughter drifted over the fence, though it wasn't particularly loud. She saw more cars parking along the street and made detailed notes about each arrival. Back at the party, Sophie had organized an impromptu dance performance with some of the other children. They twirled and jumped to the music while parents recorded videos on their phones. MJ and the other older kids had started a basketball game in the driveway, taking advantage of the new hoop. "Your home is beautiful, Lisa," said Amy Carter, helping herself to some macaroni salad. "The neighborhood seems perfect." Lisa nodded, though her expression held a hint of concern. "Most neighbors have been welcoming, though the lady next door." She trailed off, noticing Karen peering through her blinds again. The afternoon progressed pleasantly. Officers who couldn't attend due to being on duty stopped by briefly to congratulate Marcus and grab a plate of food. Each time a patrol car pulled up, Karen's curtains twitched, and she added to her growing list of suspicious activities. Around 4 o'clock, Marcus's parents arrived, bringing with them a huge tray of their special flan for dessert. Marcus Sr. immediately joined his son at the grill, while Gloria Martinez hugged her grandchildren and began distributing homemade cookies to all the kids. "My hijo," Gloria said proudly, watching Marcus in his element among his colleagues and friends. "Look at all you've accomplished." The party had reached that perfect moment when everyone was relaxed and content. Some guests sat in chairs sharing stories, while others played with the kids or helped themselves to seconds and thirds of the delicious food. The music provided a pleasant background without being overwhelming. Officer Joe Bennett raised his glass in a toast. "To Captain Martinez, the best leader and friend we could ask for. You earned this promotion, and we're all better officers because of your guidance." Everyone cheered, clinking their glasses together. Marcus looked around at the gathering, his colleagues who had become friends, his family, and all their children playing together, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. But Karen Whitmore had reached her limit. The sight of so many people enjoying themselves in what she considered her quiet neighborhood was too much. She picked up her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. Meanwhile, Lisa was serving dessert, the flan disappearing quickly as people raved about its creamy perfection. Gloria shared stories about Marcus as a child, making everyone laugh with tales of his early dreams of becoming a police officer. "He used to direct traffic for the neighborhood cats," Gloria chuckled. "Always trying to keep everyone safe, even then." The children had moved on to a game of hide and seek, their shrieks of delight echoing across the yard. Parents kept watchful eyes on them while continuing their conversations. Several off-duty officers were discussing recent community outreach programs they hoped to expand under Marcus's leadership. "We need more events like this," Diane observed, gesturing at the diverse group of families enjoying themselves. "Breaking down barriers, bringing people together. That's what real community policing is about." Marcus agreed, serving up the last batch of burgers. "That's exactly what I want to focus on as captain. Building trust, making connections, showing people we're part of the community too." The sun was starting to lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Some guests had already left, but many remained, reluctant to end such a perfect afternoon. Lisa began packing up leftover food, accepting help from several friends who insisted on staying to clean up. No one noticed Karen's furtive phone call or the way she paced anxiously by her window afterward. The party continued, winding down naturally as evening approached. Parents gathered their tired children, thanking the Martinez family for their hospitality. "Best BBQ ever," Sam declared, helping to fold up chairs. "We need to make this a regular thing." As the crowd thinned, Marcus and Lisa stood together, watching their children play one last game with their new friends. The date had been everything they'd hoped for, a perfect celebration of their new home and Marcus's achievement. Little did they know that Karen's actions would soon turn their peaceful celebration into something entirely different. But for now, they were simply a family enjoying a successful gathering with friends and loved ones, feeling blessed and grateful for their new beginning in this neighborhood. The sound of approaching sirens was still minutes away, and the Martinez family savored these last peaceful moments of their perfect afternoon, unaware of the drama about to unfold. The evening was settling in nicely when Karen Whitmore finally decided to take direct action. She had spent the afternoon documenting what she considered disturbances: the laughter of children, the smell of grilled food, and the sound of gentle music. Dressed in her perfectly pressed beige pantsuit, she marched across her lawn toward the Martinez property. The party had naturally quieted as some guests left, while others helped clean up. The music played softly in the background as Lisa wrapped leftover food and Marcus cleaned the grill. The children had switched to quieter games, tired from an afternoon of running and playing. "Excuse me." Karen's sharp voice cut through the peaceful scene. She stood at the edge of the Martinez's property, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "I need to speak with whoever is in charge here." Marcus turned from the grill, wiping his hands on a towel. "Good evening. I'm Marcus Martinez, and this is our home. Is there something I can help you with?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the gathering. "Do you people realize this is a quiet neighborhood? We have standards here. This kind of activity isn't appropriate." Lisa joined her husband, maintaining a calm smile despite Karen's hostile tone. "We're just having a family BBQ to celebrate moving in. Everything's winding down now." "Family BBQ?" Karen scoffed, gesturing at the remaining guests. "I've been watching all day. There must have been 30 people here. The traffic, the noise, it's completely unacceptable." Marcus stepped forward, his voice remaining professional and measured, the same tone he used to diffuse tense situations at work. "Ma'am, we've kept the music at a reasonable level, and all our guests parked legally. We're not breaking any local ordinances." "Well, I've already called the proper authorities," Karen announced, lifting her chin. "They'll sort this out. We'll see what the police have to say about this gathering." Several of the remaining guests exchanged knowing looks. Officer Sam Carter couldn't quite hide his smile as he continued stacking chairs. Detective Diane Miller shook her head slightly, gathering her children closer to watch the scene unfold. "The police?" Lisa repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You called the police because we're having a BBQ." "I've reported suspicious activity," Karen declared. "Large groups gathering, constant traffic in and out, noise disturbances. This neighborhood has rules." Marcus maintained his composure, though his eyes held a mix of disappointment and understanding. He dealt with similar situations throughout his career, though never as the target. "Ma'am, I want to be clear. You called the police because my family and friends are enjoying a Sunday BBQ. Don't try to make this about something it's not," Karen snapped, but her voice held a slight tremor. "This is about maintaining neighborhood standards. I don't care who you are. You can't just move in and disrupt everything." In the distance, police sirens became audible. Karen's face lit up with satisfaction, while several of the remaining guests struggled to contain their amusement. MG and Sophia moved closer to their parents, both looking confused and slightly worried. "Mom?" Sophia whispered, clutching Lisa's hand. "Are we in trouble?" Lisa squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly. "No, sweetie, everything's fine. This is just a misunderstanding." The police cruiser pulled up to the curb, its lights flashing but siren now silent. Officers Andy Richards and Mary Palmer stepped out, immediately taking in the scene. Their expressions remained professional, but anyone who knew them well could see the slight twitch of their lips. Karen strode toward them, her confidence growing. "Officers, I'm the one who called. This gathering has been going on all day and—" "Good evening, Captain Martinez," Officer Richards called out, cutting off Karen's speech. "Is everything all right, sir?" The color drained from Karen's face as she slowly turned to look at Marcus. Officer Palmer was already walking past her, greeting Marcus with a respectful nod. "Everything's fine, officers," Marcus replied calmly. "We're just finishing up a celebration for my promotion and our move to the neighborhood. My neighbor here had some concerns about the gathering." Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The realization that she had just called the police on the district's new police captain was slowly sinking in. "Captain," Officer Palmer said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the situation's irony, "we received a call about suspicious activities and noise complaints. From what I can see, This appears to be a family gathering well within acceptable noise levels. That's correct, officer, Marcus confirmed. We've been celebrating with family and friends, including many of your fellow officers. He gestured to Sam and Diane, who waved from where they stood. Karen's face had turned an interesting shade of red. I didn't. You're the new police captain? Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied evenly. I was going to introduce myself properly tomorrow. Once we were settled in, I believe in being a good neighbor and maintaining open communication. The remaining guests watched the scene unfold, some hiding smiles behind their hands. Gloria Martinez shook her head sadly, pulling her grandchildren close. I think, Officer Richards said diplomatically, this has been a misunderstanding. Captain Martinez and his family appear to be having a perfectly legal gathering that's already winding down for the evening. Karen stumbled backward a few steps, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. I didn't. I was just trying to. This isn't what. Ma'am, Marcus said gently, I understand wanting to protect your neighborhood. But next time, maybe start with a friendly conversation instead of assumptions and police calls. We're all neighbors here. The officers completed their obligatory check, documenting that no laws or ordinances had been violated. Karen remained rooted to the spot, watching as they chatted casually with Marcus about upcoming department meetings. As the police cruiser pulled away, Karen finally found her voice again. I should go. She turned quickly, practically running back to her house. The remaining guests helped finish the cleanup, discussing the incident in hushed tones. Marcus and Lisa stood together, watching their neighbors retreat. Well, Lisa sighed, that's not exactly how I hoped to meet the neighbors. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Sometimes people need time to adjust their perspectives. Maybe this will be a learning experience for everyone. As the last guests left and the Martinez family headed inside, lights began going out in Karen's house. The evening settled into silence. The neighborhood had changed. Word of the incident would spread, and Karen's actions would have consequences she hadn't considered when she picked up her phone to make that call. The Martinez family got ready for bed that night, tired but unbowed by the confrontation. They had faced prejudice before and would likely face it again, but they knew who they were and what they stood for. As Marcus tucked Sophia into bed, she asked one final question. Daddy, why didn't that lady like our party? Marcus kissed her forehead, considering his words carefully. Sometimes, sweetheart, people are scared of things they don't understand. But we'll keep being ourselves, and maybe one day she'll learn to be a better neighbor. The night settled over the neighborhood, but the story of Karen's misguided police call was just beginning to spread through the community, setting the stage for changes no one had anticipated. Monday morning arrived with the kind of buzz that only spreads through a small community when something noteworthy has happened. The incident at the Martinez family BBQ had already become the talk of the neighborhood, spreading from house to house like wildfire. Officer Kevin Brown sat at his desk in the police station, filling out the incident report from the previous evening's call. He couldn't help but shake his head as he typed, remembering Karen Whitmore's face when she realized who Marcus was. His partner, Officer Patricia Mills, leaned against his desk, reading over his shoulder. You know this report is going to end up being discussed at the next community meeting, Patricia said, sipping her morning coffee. Calling the police on the new police captain, that's going to be hard to live down. The police station was unusually busy that morning. Officers who hadn't been at the BBQ were hearing about the incident from their colleagues, and the story grew more interesting with each retelling. The dispatch operator who had taken Karen's call was sharing the recording, where Karen could be heard describing a suspicious gathering and potential illegal activities. Marcus arrived at the station for his first official day as captain, dressed in his crisp uniform with new captain's bars gleaming on his collar. The officers on duty stood a little straighter, offering respectful nods and good morning, Captain, as he passed. He noticed the hushed conversations and knowing looks but maintained his professional demeanor. In his new office, Marcus found a stack of messages waiting for him. Several were from community leaders who had already heard about the incident and wanted to express their support. One was from the mayor herself, who wanted to discuss community relations and suggested using this incident as a teaching moment. Back in the neighborhood, Karen Whitmore was experiencing the consequences of her actions. When she went out to get her morning paper, she noticed several neighbors watching from their windows and front yards. Some quickly turned away, while others stared openly, their disapproval evident. Barbara Johnson, the neighborhood association president, called an emergency meeting for that evening. The email she sent to all residents carefully avoided mentioning names but referred to recent incidents that require community discussion. Throughout the day, Karen received several calls from neighbors she had contacted the day before about the BBQ. Many of them now wanted to distance themselves from her actions. "I can't believe you actually called the police," her friend Susan whispered over the phone. "And on the new police captain. What were you thinking, Karen?" At the station, officers Brown and Mills were dispatched to handle a minor traffic accident. As they drove through the neighborhood, they noticed Karen's house, now seemingly closed up tight with all curtains drawn. "Should we wave?" Officer Brown joked, but Patricia shook her head. "Let's maintain professionalism," she replied, though she couldn't hide her smile. "The captain would want us to take the high road." By lunchtime, the story had reached local community social media groups. While no one posted anything directly accusatory, there were several discussions about being welcoming to new neighbors and avoiding assumptions based on appearances. Marcus spent his lunch break dealing with calls from various community leaders and organizing upcoming meetings. His secretary, Alice, helped him sort through the messages. "Sir," she said, holding up one particular note, "the head of the Cultural Diversity Committee wants to know if you'd be willing to speak at their next meeting. They think your experience could help address some ongoing issues in the community." Marcus looked up from his paperwork, considering the request. "Schedule it," he decided. "Maybe some good can come from this situation." Back at home, Lisa was receiving her own share of attention. Several neighbors she hadn't met yet stopped by to introduce themselves and apologize for Karen's behavior. Each brought some form of welcome gift: cookies, potted plants, or handwritten cards. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly lady from across the street, brought over a fresh-baked apple pie. "Mi querida," she said, hugging Lisa, "please don't judge our neighborhood by one person's actions. We're not all like that." The children had their own experiences at school, and she found himself the center of attention when word spread that his dad was the new police captain. Some kids asked about the BBQ incident, having overheard their parents discussing it. "My mom says your neighbor is in big trouble," one of MJ's classmates whispered during lunch. "Is it true she tried to get your whole family arrested?" MJ handled the questions with maturity, following his father's example of staying calm and not escalating situations. "It was just a misunderstanding," he would say, changing the subject. As the afternoon wore on, more community leaders reached out to the police department. The local newspaper called, asking for comments about the incident and community relations in general. The department's public relations officer carefully crafted a response that emphasized community unity and avoiding premature judgments. Karen spent the day inside, watching as various neighbors stopped at the Martinez house with their welcome gifts. She noticed Officer Mills drive by twice during her regular patrol, each time slowing slightly near her house. The weight of her actions was beginning to sink in fully. At the station, Marcus called a brief meeting with his officers. He stood before them, his presence commanding respect not just from his rank, but from his handling of the situation. "I know many of you have heard about yesterday's incident," he began. "I want to be clear, we will continue to respond professionally to all calls, regardless of who makes them or why. We serve everyone in this community equally." The officers nodded, impressed but not surprised by their new captain's stance. Many had worked with Marcus for years and knew his character well. As evening approached, the neighborhood association meeting was about to begin at the community center. Karen debated whether to attend, finally deciding she had to face her neighbors sooner or later. She put on her best outfit and prepared herself for what would surely be an uncomfortable evening. Meanwhile, Marcus returned home to find his front porch filled with welcome gifts and cards. Lisa showed him the messages of support they'd received throughout the day. Even Sophia had drawn a picture at school of their family BBQ, complete with police cars and smiling officers. "How do you want to handle this?" Lisa asked as they sorted through the gifts. "Everyone's waiting to see what we'll do next." Marcus looked at his wife, then at their children doing homework at the kitchen table. "We'll do what we've always done," he replied. "Lead by example, stay professional, and show that one person's actions don't define a community." The sun began to set on a day that had started with tension but was ending with hope. The incident had sparked important conversations throughout the community about prejudice, assumptions, and the importance of getting to know your neighbors. As Marcus helped his children with their homework, he could see Karen through the window, walking quickly toward the community center, her head down. He knew the coming days would bring more discussions, more media attention, and more opportunities for change. The police radio on his kitchen counter crackled with routine calls, a reminder that life went on. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, the Martinez family was exactly where they needed to be. Home. 2 weeks after the BBQ incident, the Martinez family's front yard looked very different from that first contentious Sunday. Colorful banners hung between trees, and tables dotted the lawn once again. But this time, the entire neighborhood had come together to organize a community unity celebration. Barbara Johnson, the neighborhood association president, had worked closely with Marcus and Lisa to plan the event. She wanted to show that Karen's actions didn't represent their community's values. The planning committee included residents from every street in the neighborhood, each bringing their own ideas and contributions. "This is what community looks like," Barbara announced as she helped Lisa arrange the food tables. People were bringing dishes from various cultural backgrounds, creating a true neighborhood potluck. Karen Whitmore had spent those 2 weeks in a self-imposed exile, leaving her house only when necessary. The neighborhood association meeting had been difficult, with several residents openly criticizing her actions. She had offered a stuttering apology, but few felt it was genuine. On the morning of the community celebration, Karen watched from behind her curtains as her neighbors set up tables and decorations. She jumped when her doorbell rang. Opening the door cautiously, she found Marcus Martinez standing there in casual clothes, holding a plate of Lisa's homemade cookies. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," he said politely. "I wanted to personally invite you to today's celebration. The whole neighborhood will be there." Karen stared at the cookies, then at Marcus. After what I did, why would you invite me?" "Because that's what neighbors do," Marcus replied simply. "Sometimes we make mistakes, but communities grow stronger when we learn from them." The celebration began at noon. Families streamed into the Martinez's yard, carrying food and chairs. Children ran around playing games while adults chatted and shared dishes. The police department had sent several officers to join the celebration, including Officers Brown and Mills, who were grilling hot dogs and hamburgers. Local news crews arrived to cover the event. They interviewed Marcus about community policing and neighborhood unity. Lisa spoke about the importance of breaking down barriers and getting to know your neighbors. Even MJ and Sophia got their moment on camera, talking about making new friends in the neighborhood. Around 2 o'clock, movement at Karen's house caught everyone's attention. She emerged slowly, carrying a casserole dish. The crowd grew quiet as she approached the food tables. Lisa stepped forward to meet her. "It's my grandmother's recipe," Karen said quietly, setting down the dish. "I never shared it before." Lisa smiled warmly. "Thank you for coming. Would you like to help me serve it?" As the afternoon progressed, something remarkable happened. Karen, initially standing awkwardly at the edges of the gathering, found herself drawn into conversations. She learned that the Rodriguez family had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, that the Paddles' daughter was a doctor at the local hospital, and that the Jacksons ran a successful bakery downtown. The children played inclusive games organized by Sophia, who had insisted everyone should be able to join in. MJ and his friends had set up a basketball tournament where teams were randomly assigned, mixing kids from all backgrounds together. Marcus spent time talking with each family, learning their stories and concerns. His natural ability to listen and connect with people showed why he had been chosen as police captain. He made mental notes about community issues that needed attention, already planning how to address them. Mrs. Rodriguez shared her famous empanadas, teaching interested neighbors how to fold the dough just right. The Paddles brought samosas that disappeared within minutes. The Jacksons contributed a towering cake decorated with welcome messages in different languages. As the sun began to set, Barbara called everyone together for a group photo. Standing in front of the Martinez's house, the diverse group of neighbors smiled for the camera. Karen hesitated at the edge of the group until Sophia ran over and pulled her into the picture. "This is just the beginning," Barbara announced after the photo. "We're starting a monthly neighborhood dinner, rotating houses each time. We want to keep this spirit of community alive." The idea was met with enthusiastic approval. People began signing up to host future gatherings, sharing contact information, and planning committees. What had started as a response to an unfortunate incident was becoming a true movement for change. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Karen approached Marcus and Lisa. Her eyes were slightly wet as she spoke. "I've lived here for 20 years, she said, but I never really knew my neighbors until today. I'm sorry it took. What happened? To open my eyes." Marcus nodded, understanding the courage it took to admit one's mistakes. "The past is the past," he said. "What matters is how we move forward." Lisa added, "We're having coffee and breakfast planning sessions every Saturday morning for the monthly dinners. You're welcome to join us." As the last guests left, carrying empty dishes and happy memories, the Martinez family stood on their porch. The yard was clean. Everyone had pitched in to help, and the street was quiet again, but something fundamental had changed. "Did we make a difference, Dad?" NJ asked, picking up a stray balloon. Marcus looked at his son, then at the neighborhood around them. Houses that had seemed separate and isolated 2 weeks ago now felt connected. You could see lights on in living rooms where families were probably talking about the day's events. "We all made a difference," he answered. "Sometimes it takes something challenging to bring people together, but what matters is what we do afterward." Lisa wrapped her arms around her family. "This is why we became a police family," she said. "Not just to enforce laws, but to help build community." The next morning, the local newspaper's headline read, "Neighborhood Celebrates Unity, from Conflict to Community." The article featured the group photo and interviews with various residents, including Karen, who spoke about learning and growth. The Martinez family had turned a potentially divisive incident into an opportunity for positive change. Their new neighborhood had become more than just a place to live. It was now a true community where people looked out for each other, learned from each other, and grew together. As Marcus drove to work on Monday, he noticed neighbors waving to each other, children walking to school together, and Karen Whitmore tending her garden, exchanging greetings with passersby. Sometimes, he realized, the best response to prejudice wasn't anger or punishment, but showing people a better way forward. The BBQ incident would be remembered not for its initial conflict, but for how it transformed a neighborhood and brought people together in ways they never expected, and that was a story worth telling.